Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Chapter 6 is emergency situations and challenging road conditions. So I have talked a bit about that before. There's ideal road conditions, which means it's sunny, it's daylight, and the pavement is dry. And there's no other emergencies like construction or collision, anything like that. So those are like perfect conditions is ideal. Anything other than that, like weather, construction, emergency, there was a collision, an accident, something like that, then that's what we're going to talk about today and how to handle those situations. So if your vehicle ever breaks down, it's important to keep your vehicle working properly, of course. You want to try to keep up your maintenance with it, which meaning regular oil changes, checking things, getting it inspected every once in a while, and not ignoring weird sounds. I used to do that. I'd hear something and then I would just turn up the radio louder and try to ignore it. That's not the way to go because it could actually lead to more problems down the road. So you want to make sure that your vehicle is always properly getting maintained and in working order as much as possible. Because it can be dangerous if you don't take regular good maintenance of your vehicle. You could get yourself into a situation where you have a blowout, like on your tire. If your tire, it's called a blowout, where your tire would pop and you get a flat, and that can be really dangerous if you're traveling at high speeds, like on the highway. One sec. I'm just gonna make sure I can see. Okay. Box. I gotta get a 3 o'clock and just let me know. Yep, no problem. So Samantha, I did put in a link for practice quizzes if you want to try one of those before, like I'll give a little bit of a break before 3. Maybe on your break, try doing one of those practice tests to prepare you. So it can be dangerous for you and passengers. Emergency. If your vehicle does break down, if that happens while you're driving, change lanes safely and move off to that emergency lane. Remember the end of the day yesterday, I talked about some people, we most commonly know that on the highway, there's your main road highway, and then there's a little section of pavement before the grass or the ditch. That's usually called the shoulder, is the term, the common term, but what it's actually called is the emergency lane. So if you see it on your test and they're talking about the emergency lane, that's what it is. It's that shoulder piece on a highway. Urban roads here in the city, there isn't an emergency lane. There's usually just your lane. But if you are in an emergency situation in the city and you don't have a lane to pull over to, you just pull over to the far right. So you change lanes, move, try to get off the road if you can, but if not, move as far over as you can. Or try to get to the nearest exit of the highway. Like it's always safer to pull off of a highway because of the high speeds, but if you can't avoid that, then you can pull off, turn on your hazard lights. So what are hazard lights? Those are, it'll be when you turn on your hazard lights, there's a symbol, it's a triangle, and I should have an image of it, but there's a triangle in your car, and that means your hazard lights. If you push that, then your back and front, your lights will flash, like the turning lights. They all go on and they continue to flash. That'll signal to other drivers that you are in a distressful situation, like emergency, you're a stopped vehicle, or even if you're moving really slowly. Say you're trying to get to the next exit, but your vehicle's only moving at, say, 20 kilometers an hour. You turn on those flashing lights and the other drivers will know to move over and give you some room or to adjust their speed. So it's signaling, it turns on all your signal lights. Also, if you're pulled over, you can raise up your hood because then that signals to other drivers as well that you're in emergency. So do not try to do any roadside repairs on a crowded highway. So I've seen this before on highways where people are trying to change their tire. You're not actually, technically, you are not supposed to do that. You are supposed to call a tow truck or a mechanic. You're supposed to move that vehicle off of the road. You are not allowed to be doing maintenance on your car, especially like changing a tire. So think of this, if you are trying to change a tire on a really, really busy highway and it's just you and you pull off one of those tires and you're putting on your donut or your spare tire, and say that other tire rolls off onto the highway, that can be extremely dangerous for other drivers, right? And for yourself. The other thing too is if you're trying to do maintenance on your car on a busy highway, your attention is not on what's going on the highway. You're focused on your vehicle. And if you're getting underneath your vehicle and other drivers, if unfortunately, what if a driver were to hit your parked vehicle and you're underneath it, that could be absolutely fatal. So really, really be mindful that if you're in this situation, you're putting yourself at risk if you do any of those maintenance, and you're not allowed to be doing maintenance on a car. Also too, like if it's something with your oil or your gas tank or something like that, and if you have fluids leaking out of your car, you can be in a situation that's unsafe for you to be there, but it could also be leaking fluids onto the road itself. So the other tip too is to kind of move far away from your vehicle if you can. You want to be far enough away from your car and visible enough to other drivers. So you don't want to necessarily be hanging out in the car. You want to be away from your vehicle. Just it depends on the situation that you're in, but the other drivers need to see where you are. And if you're in a situation like this girl here in the picture, she's got her hood up and she's on the far corner of her car, which is good. She's not by the highway. However, other vehicles won't necessarily see her standing there. So it's better for her to move a little bit farther away from the car and make her phone call. So emergency braking. As you can see here, there might be situations where you have to brake really fast, and we talked about the best method is a threshold braking technique. So press down really hard on the brake pedal, but not hard enough to cause the wheels to lock up. If the wheels do lock up, quickly release a bit of pressure, not too much, and then apply that pressure again. But if you slam on your brakes instantly, in this picture here, somebody put on their brakes and then their tires locked up and then they were skidding. The car was still sliding, even though the wheels weren't turning. The car was sliding on the road, and that's what caused the rubber marks on the road. So be mindful. Braking really hard can put yourself into a skid, and skids are really difficult to maneuver, and we're going to talk about different skids. So look and steer in the direction you want to go. Anytime you are emergency braking, still try to steer. So like I said, if there's a deer, if in front of you or an animal, emergency situation, instead of locking up your brakes and hitting the deer, you may actually be able to avoid it and swerve or go around it or steer in another direction to avoid a collision. Some vehicles come with the anti-lock braking system, which I talked about, and everybody calls it ABS. So if you ever see that word ABS, you'll see it in your driver's manual. If somebody talks about your ABS system, it's your anti-lock braking system. It just means that that system's preventing your vehicle from locking up. It's trying to prevent your tires from locking up, and it's trying to prevent your steering from locking up when you brake. So skids. Skidding means that you've lost control of your vehicle. We talked about stopping and braking should be very smooth, and you should be in total control of how fast and slow your vehicle is going. But in a skid situation, you're still sliding when you're trying to stop, or your vehicle's starting to slide over into another direction. So you've lost traction. The tires have lost traction to the road. And that's why they're kind of going crazy. Your car could be going everywhere. Other terms that you might see is called fishtailing. That's where your back end of your vehicle is moving actually back and forth. It's called fishtailing. So in this image, this is a legit sign that you'll see. And what this sign means is that the road is slippery up ahead. And that's the other thing. Anybody who's reviewing for your tests, go back to chapter 2 and make sure you recognize all those different kinds of signs, not just regulatory and construction and warning like this. Make sure you see all those signs and what they mean. Like an H means a hospital, emergency situations, all that stuff. I didn't show you every single sign that there is, but they are in your guide, and you definitely got to go look and memorize those signs. You're going to have some questions on your test about what a sign is. So the best situation is to avoid a skid in general, and the best way to do that is to reduce your speed. If you're in ice or snow or road, slow down. However, if you do find yourself in a skid, there's certain things that you do. Yeah, so most skids, which we'll talk about, there's a video about skidding and getting out of a skid. So most skids are a result of driver error. It's because they're going into their turn too quickly, or they're hitting the gas too quickly. So if you're at a stop, you're at a red light and you're stopped, and if you slam on that gas, that accelerator too quickly, your wheels are spinning faster than your vehicle can start moving. So that's a skidding situation as well. When you're stopping too late and your vehicle's trying to stop itself, but it's sliding, that's a skid. So there's a few different ways you can get into a skidding situation. It's any time that the vehicle's doing something that you're not trying to get it to do. It kind of has a mind of its own. So it's when you're turning too sharply, going too fast, if you're braking too hard, or accelerating too fast, right? And driving too fast when you hit like ice or snow, rain, mud, sand, gravel roads, those can all cause skidding situations as well. Another common cause of skids is improperly adjusted brakes, which I talked about a lot, about your maintenance and your upkeep and having newer tires if possible, or at least knowing your tires. If you're running low on the tread, then you know you need to allow yourself more time to stop. So also your brakes, if your brakes are not as new as they used to be, or the brake pads need to get changed, then that means that when you're applying pressure to your brake, they're not stopping the wheels. There's not as much pressure on them. So they would need to get looked at, adjusted, and potentially get fixed. And check your owner's manual. Your manual of your car will tell you when you should be doing regular maintenance. It'll either tell you a time frame, like every year, or it can tell you also how much kilometers or mileage you have in your car. So like oil changes, it'll tell you every maybe 5,000 kilometers, you should get an oil change, and you got to keep those things up to make sure your vehicle's in good working order. And you can find that in your manual. So here's a video on skidding in situations like ice, rain, snow, winter, all that kind of stuff. Oh.
It's a heart-stopping moment. Has it happened to you yet? If it hasn't, it will. Unless you're prepared. This video will show you how to correct a slide on an icy road. But more importantly...
Oh, and I just gotta let you know, when he's saying slide, he uses the term slide, but it's the same thing as a skid. They're both mean the same thing. Skidding, or sliding, same thing.
Help you avoid one in the first place. This is Dan Robinson with icyroadsafety.com. We're going to talk about 3 main points in this video when it comes to dealing with icy road slides. The first one, be aware of the weather conditions in the wintertime. 2, slow down when icy roads are imminent or in progress. And 3, respond appropriately if your vehicle begins to slide. Before we get into correcting a slide, let's talk about how you can avoid one in the first place. Anytime the temperatures are near or below freezing, keep track of the precipitation in your area before you get on the road. There are many apps you can use on your phone to keep track of the weather. If precipitation is in the...
How many skids have you got? Okay, sorry. I was just checking the chat. I didn't know it would stop the video.
Weather conditions and slow down when icing is expected or in progress, you'll avoid getting into a dangerous slide in the first place. That's always the better outcome. The statistics show that most serious and fatal icy road crashes happen at high speeds, generally above 45 miles an hour. The higher your speed, the more likely you are to lose control, and the more difficult a slide will be to correct successfully. Your speed should never be above 45 miles an hour on icy roads, even on a highway. Some types of road icing are more dangerous and may require even slower speeds. In some cases, it's just a bad idea to be on the road at all. As a general rule, if your car begins to fishtail or slide, it's a sign you're going too fast for the conditions. Before we talk about correcting a slide, let's talk about oversteer and understeer. Both of these conditions can happen on icy roads, but it's oversteer that is the most common cause of crashes at high speeds. Understeer happens when your front wheels lose grip in a turn, causing your car to keep going straight even though your wheels are turned to one side. Oversteer, on the other hand, happens when your rear wheels lose grip with the road. In an oversteer condition, the back end of the car will slide outward opposite the direction of your steering input. Oversteer slides can happen when rounding a curve, turning a corner, or even with a slight steering motion such as changing lanes on a highway. Most fishtailing is an oversteer condition. Slides can also be triggered by braking or accelerating. Both of these are actions that can cause one or more of the vehicle's wheels to lose their grip. Now that we've covered the basics of preventing a slide, let's talk about what to do if one happens. There are 3 points to remember.
Oh, sorry.
It's a in this case,
Where was that?
3 points driver hits the brakes. Braking, in this case, caused a total spin out before the driver even had a chance to correct the slide. For slide correction to work, your wheels need to be turning freely. The second point, turn your front wheels in the same direction that the rear of the vehicle is sliding. You have also heard about turning into the slide. These both mean the same thing. For example, if the back of your car slides to the right, turn the wheel to the right. As the car straightens out, straighten the steering wheel. It's helpful to keep your eyes focused on where you want the car to go, that is, on the road ahead. The amount you'll need to turn the wheel is proportional to how far and how fast the back of your car is sliding. A small slide will only require a slight steering motion. What often makes correcting slides so difficult is that once your car begins to respond to you turning the wheel, it will often snap back in the other direction. When you're in the process of correcting a slide in one direction, be prepared for the car to swing back in the opposite direction. This oscillation can happen several times, and you'll need to respond accordingly. Let's take a look at correcting a couple of real-world slides from the driver's view. The steering wheel position is superimposed. Finally, the last point. Don't panic and don't overcorrect. An oversteer slide gives the car angular momentum, which means it will want to keep rotating into a full spin. Overcorrecting will send the car rotating faster than the steering can counter, and the car will spin out. Let's take a look at some real-world examples of accidents and slides, some that were corrected successfully, some that weren't. So let's take a look at this video here. This is a bridge, an interstate bridge, that curves pretty sharply to the left here. This is in Charleston, West Virginia. I want you to notice the car's wheels and which direction the car rotates. So first of all, the car is rounding a curve here, and you can see the back end comes out to the right. Now the driver right here is responding correctly. You see his wheels are turned just a little bit back to the right in the direction that he's sliding. Now I want you to look at how the car responds to him turning the wheel to the right. See, the car comes back, and now it snaps back over to the left. And you can see, again, he's turning his wheel to the left to correct, which is the right move, but then watch what happens. The car slides back out to the right. At this stage, he's overcorrected. It was just a little bit too much, and it sent the back end sliding out to the right, far to the right. Now once again, turning the wheel to the right, and watch what happens. So there he corrects. See how the car will go back in the opposite direction? So he's turning the wheel back to the left to counter that little slide to the left, but unfortunately in this case it's going to be a little too much. And again, this driver was only going about 55 miles an hour, but you can see how difficult it is. Even if you respond correctly, it's very easy to overcorrect at high speeds. What I'm about to show you here is a very rare event. This is somebody that successfully corrected a slide. So let's watch and see what happens. The guy's going around the curve here, which is curving to the left, which means in most cases an oversteer slide is going to make his car slide out to the right, which is exactly what happens. So let's watch. See right there, back of the car comes around to the right. The driver appropriately steers to the right to counter. And you can see how the car comes back out to the left to respond to that. And he manages to correct it. Now the other thing here, you can see one of the reasons this driver was able to pull this off is he ended up on a section of the road that was actually salted, and there wasn't as much ice right here where he was. So that kind of helped him out there, but you can see that it takes a little bit of luck in addition to the skill. Now this one is going to be an interesting one. This driver, again, going around a right-hand curve, which way do you expect the back end of the car to come out? It's going to be coming out to the left. So right there, back end comes out to the left. You can see the driver responding correctly. He's turning his wheels to the left to counter that slide. And then the back of the car comes back around to the right. He's countering again. Same thing. Now, this is an interesting situation because right ahead of this car is the end of the bridge. So he's on ice right now, but he's about to drive on pavement that's just wet. So his tires are going to grab suddenly and make him swing around to the other direction. This next clip is going to be in an identical time and place. Same situation as the previous vehicle. The driver enters the right-hand turn. The back of the car swings out to the left as it starts to slide. The driver steers just slightly to the left, just enough to get it back in line. The car rebounds a little bit to the right. The driver corrects and actually manages to pull this off. Let's watch it again. Here's yet another example of why you don't want to hit your brakes. I want you to pay attention to the brake lights on this pickup truck. Watch what happens as soon as the brake lights light up. This driver wasn't even in much of a slide until he hit his brakes. The main takeaway from this video is that correcting a slide can be done, but it becomes much more difficult at higher speeds. If you slow down to below 45 miles an hour when icy roads are imminent or in progress, you'll end up with the best possible outcome, avoiding a slide in the first place.
So you want to hopefully never get into a skid or a slide. That's the best course of action.
Okay, yeah.
From the beginning. But if you ever do find yourself in a skidding situation, the best thing is to not get in one and by reducing your speed to the conditions. If it's at nighttime, if it's raining, it's snowing, the best thing is slow down. But if you do get into a skid, you need to, number one, like as he said in the video, do not use the brakes. And in that last example of the truck, he wasn't even in that much of a bad skid, but putting his brakes on caused the whole vehicle to spin. Second thing is always steer in the direction you want to go, where you want the front of your vehicle to go. So in all those examples, the tire was turning, or the driver was turning the wheels slightly to where it wanted to go. You never want to oversteer it, which is number 3. Do not oversteer. If you start cranking your tire, and that's what I think most people do in skids, is their vehicle's turning and they try to get it back on the road in the direction they want it to go, but it's not going because the tires aren't catching. So then they steer harder. That's not usually the way to go. You just need to make slight steering adjustments and then wait about a second or two for your car to react. And then once it starts making its maneuver, then you can make slight adjustments again. But if it doesn't react instantly, don't crank the tire over to the other side, because then you're oversteering it, and that's when you can end up spinning out completely. And number 4, don't panic. That's the other thing that people might do in a skidding situation, because it happens so quickly and it's very scary when you don't have control of your car. And a lot of people end up panicking and let go of the steering wheel because they just don't know how to handle it. And that can make things much worse, because then you're giving up total control to the road. So the next clip here, or the next adverse situation or non-challenging situation, is nighttime driving. I talked about how you need to be an experienced driver in order to nighttime drive, because it is much harder to see at night. Very obvious statement, but I think we don't realize exactly how much we take for granted with our eyesight until you start night driving. And we don't realize how hard it is on your eyes. It creates a lot of eye strain, and it can make you very tired as your eyes are constantly adjusting to the light. So the reason why night driving makes it really difficult and creates all that eye strain, not only because you can't see, but also because your pupils are constantly adjusting. They're dilating and undilating to all the different flashes of light. So if you're in really dark driving and it's just you, everything's fine, your eyes have adjusted. And then there's a vehicle coming from the oncoming direction and they have really bright lights. It flashes you, could potentially temporarily blind you for a second, and your eyes, until they adjust to that light again, to the brightness, and then every time, and then the car goes, and then you have to adjust back to the dark light again. So that transition of light and dark and light and really bright, it really, really puts a strain on your eyes. So it's really important to take your time. The best thing to do at nighttime is just slow down. Slow down 5 or 10 kilometers under the speed limit, even farther if you have to. Go down 20 kilometers if you need to. Hi, Caddy. We're here, we're doing nighttime driving. So be aware that daytime running lights or your parking lights, there's different terms, but most newer vehicles within the last 10 years, if your car's been built within the last 10 or 20 years, most of them are equipped with daytime running lights, which means as you turn on your vehicle, there is a bit of lights on the front of your car. However, that is not your those are not your actual headlights. Those are daytime running lights, are different than your headlights. You actually have to turn on your headlights because they're brighter for nighttime driving. As well, your daytime running lights do not include your tail lights in the back and your dashboard lights in the front, so you can see all the gauges. So you actually have to turn on your headlights so that drivers in the back can see your lights as well. So in the back, you can see in this picture here, up in front, there's a vehicle with red lights on, and you can see that there's a car there, but you can only see the lights. That's really all you're seeing. You're seeing these little red lights. That's signaling to other drivers that there's a car up ahead, and maybe to increase your distance or to slow down. So those lights are very important to put on at night. You can't just depend on lights. So if you're traveling at a speed that does not let you see an object in time to stop, that means you're overdriving your headlights. So I'm going to show you a video of what that means. But basically, when you do shine your headlights, there's only you can't see everything like in the daytime. You can only see a certain distance in front of your car. And that's why we usually have high beams and low beams. High beams will let you see more than low beams because the high beams are pointed up farther. Low beams are pointed down to the ground. But we're going to talk about when to use high beams and when to use low beams. But the takeaway here is if you do see this term on your exam, over driving your headlights, that means you're going faster than your headlights can see. Like you're going faster than you can react to something. So if you were nighttime driving and your headlights are on and then a deer jumps out and you didn't have enough time to slow down, that means you were going too fast. You were overdriving your headlights. So best thing to do, again, slow down, reduce your speed, and just drive to as comfortable as you need to on the road.
Hey, Nicole.
Yep.
No, I'm just saying hi. Hi.
Yep. Hey, thanks, Caddy. I was kind of monitoring the chat with my phone, but I'll get you to just watch the chat box for me.
Yeah, you betcha.
Okay, so this video shows you what I mean about nighttime driving. It's going to talk about headlights, and it'll show you what to do when you're on the road driving at night and other vehicles are passing you and you get that temporary blindness like I talked about. This will show you where you're supposed to look on the road as you're passing other vehicles at night.
From sunrise to sunset, drivers have a huge advantage in the sun. Although it's easy to take for granted, the sun makes it immensely easier for us to see.
Once darkness falls, driving becomes a whole new ballgame. There's no doubt about it. Driving is a lot dicier after the sun goes down.
Driving at night does present a whole new set of circumstances for any driver, young driver or an older driver.
Darkness itself is a hazard. Even people with the best of vision cannot see as well at night. To begin with, your field of vision is less. You actually see a smaller amount of space. Objects are not as sharp, you can't perceive dips and rises as well, and you have a harder time distinguishing colors.
A person with excellent vision still needs to remember to slow down and be aware of all the hazards that could present itself at night.
You can only see as far ahead as your headlights shine. That makes it harder to see pedestrians, cyclists, animals, obstacles in the road. So go slowly enough so that you can stop within the distance lighted by your headlights. If it's safe, use your high beams, especially on open highways. But always know when to change to low beams. If you approach another car from behind, or if you meet an oncoming car, then switch to low beams. High beams blind other drivers and increase the likelihood of a crash. To avoid being blinded, don't look directly at oncoming headlights. Instead, look to the right edge of your lane and watch the oncoming car out of the corner of your eye.
A couple of other brief points. Never drive with just your parking lights on. Parking lights are designed for parking. They're not a substitute for headlights. And keep your windshield and your headlights clean. They can get real dirty real quick. It's easy enough to do. I give them a quick wipe when I'm at the gas station. It helps reduce glare, it helps the lights to shine brighter, and in general, it helps you to see much better at night.
This is Jim Angelo.
So you guys saw about nighttime driving, and you can see how visually straining it can be, right? Just let me know if there's any questions on nighttime driving. You can put that in the chat box, and Caddy can probably answer it. I'm just going to keep going so that we don't fall behind.
Yeah, you bet. I'm monitoring.
Or Delaney is having a hard time logging in. Keeps kicking him out, I think. Okay, so rain and hydroplaning. Similar, you can get into a skid situation if it's raining outside. And there's an actual term that you might see on your exam called hydroplaning. So what is hydroplaning? Hydroplaning is what happens to your vehicle when you're on wet roads. And it's when your tires have lost contact with the pavement, and typically there's a layer of water in between your tire and the pavement. So that the tread on tires of your vehicle, they're designed, those grooves and stuff on it are actually designed to remove water as you drive. But sometimes if there's heavy water, there's too much water that your vehicle can't process as much, and you end up kind of floating on the water. It seems weird that a whole car would be floating. It's just very minuscule. It's not something you can actually see with your eye, but you can definitely feel it. When you get into your car and you feel yourself hydroplane, your car might actually shift over like a whole inch, or you can feel that you're kind of it feels like a little bit that you're sliding or floating on water. It's a weird situation. And again, the best way to handle them is to slow down enough, and then you'll feel, once you slow down, you can start to feel how your tires are making contact back with the road again. So since direct contact is lost between the road surface and your tires, this can cause your vehicle to skid. And it's kind of like you're skiing on the water. So I'm going to show you guys, again, slow down. That's the only thing you get. But I'm going to show you guys another video about what that means, because it's hard. One thing for me to tell you that you're floating, but this is exactly what it looks like on a vehicle.
And nothing can prepare you for how it feels, Nicole.
Sorry?
Sorry about that. After the video, but
No, you can say it right now.
oh no, I just was going to say that due to all this rain recently,
Yeah.
like you'll feel it, guaranteed you'll feel it, and it'll be scary because I've been driving for like 20 years, right? And last week was the first time that I've ever had an experience almost lost control.
Yeah.
And I used to drive for a living, like I got my class ones, and it's the first time I've ever experienced it. So it's a really kind of uneasy feeling. So you'll feel it for sure.
Yep.
Oh, sorry, I just wanted to touch on that. Sorry about that.
No, don't apologize. That's exactly it. It's exactly what you're saying. It's one thing when you're hearing about it or someone's describing it, but it's a total other thing when you experience it. You will feel your car actually floating or shifting and moving, and it's kind of weird because you can't really control it. But the best situation, we're going to show a video about how to handle the situation if you get into a hydroplane.
The weather can present traffic hazards. Take rain. It's a hazard from the moment the first drops fall. This is when rain first mixes with oil and dust on the pavement. It's very slick. This is what happens. The dirt and oil float to the top of the water. So tires ride not only on the slippery surface of water, but also directly on the even more slippery surface of oil and dirt. It's no wonder so many crashes happen just after it starts raining. Eventually, dust and oil wash away, but plenty of hazards remain. Rain, especially heavy rain, limits your ability to see. It's hard for you to see what's going on, and it's hard for other people to see you. In addition to making it difficult to see, rain keeps roads slippery. Traction becomes a critical issue, and hydroplaning, a real danger. 3 main factors cause a car or truck to hydroplane: speed, tread depth, and water depth. The faster your car or truck goes, the more traction you lose on a wet surface. The more worn your tires are, and the shallower the tread, the more likely your car is to hydroplane. Even a thin layer of water can cause your car to lose traction. But as the water gets deeper, you lose traction sooner.
It all happens in a space no bigger than the bottom of a size 9 shoe. Now picture this, it's a smooth roadway, there's moderate rain, and you're traveling at 60 miles per hour. Under these conditions, each tire has to move away about 1 gallon of water every second. All in a space no bigger than this shoe.
Each gripping element of the tread is on the ground even less time, 1/50th of a second. During this fleeting moment, the gripping element must move the water from beneath the tire and then grip the road surface. If this doesn't happen, your car may likely hydroplane.
When a car hydroplanes, the most important thing that someone needs to remember is don't panic.
First, do not brake or accelerate suddenly. Since hydroplaning is a loss of traction to the front tires, sudden braking on a front or rear wheel drive slows the front tires.
Oh, it does that every time.
That someone needs to remember is don't panic.
First, do not brake or accelerate suddenly. Since hydroplaning is a loss of traction to the front tires, sudden braking on a front or rear wheel drive slows the front tires but locks the rear tires. This can cause a spin out. Also, sudden acceleration on a front or rear wheel drive may take the vehicle straight ahead. This could be dangerous if the vehicle is pointed toward the edge of the roadway. According to some driving experts, what you should do depends on the type of vehicle you're in. Listen for the type of vehicle you drive. A front-wheel drive with an anti-lock brake system and traction control system. Front-wheel drive without an anti-lock brake system and traction control system. A rear-wheel drive with an anti-lock brake system and traction control system. If you begin to hydroplane in one of these types of cars, then some driving experts suggest you do this. Look for open space and plan to travel in that direction. Stay slightly on the accelerator and steer gently toward the open space which you have identified. If you are in a rear-wheel drive without an anti-lock brake system and traction control system, then do this. Look for open space and plan to travel in that direction. Ease off the accelerator and steer towards the open space which you have identified. Traction control systems, by the way, have been installed in vehicles for a number of years now, but everyone may not be familiar with it. This is a system that prevents tires from spinning under acceleration. If your vehicle has a traction control system, there should be an icon indicating so on your dashboard.
Another note, it's important not to have the cruise control engaged in heavy rain due to a sudden acceleration problem. The vehicle will recognize the water buildup as a slowdown and ask for more power. This need for more power may shift, causing the vehicle to shift to a lower gear and build more water under the tires. This causes a cycle of more power and more push on the front tires.
You can avoid hydroplaning by making sure the tread on your tires is thick enough and by slowing down. Here's a good rule of thumb for checking your tread. Stick a penny upside down in your tread. If Lincoln's head is hidden, then your tread is thick enough. If the tread doesn't hide Lincoln's head, then your tread is too thin and you need new tires. When it comes to speed on a wet road, slow down by about 1/3 of what you would normally drive. For example, if you normally drive 60 miles per hour on a dry highway, slow down to 40 when it's wet.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things they're saying in that video. Traction control, like they said, that controls how much your tires could spin when you accelerate. And then ABS, we talked about anti-lock braking system. And in those situations of raining, hydroplaning, they're very similar to skid, where you don't want to put the brakes. You want to steer in the direction you want to go. You can slow your vehicle down by taking your foot off the brake and then make minor adjustments from there. It's also an American video, so we talked about a penny, but that tip still works if you wanted to use just a coin of some kind. You want to have some tread depth on your tires. If it's bald or there's nothing there, you're going to have a really hard time driving safely on certain roads. So hydroplaning, very similar to skidding in that you never want to brake and you never want to panic. And if you're not feeling comfortable to drive in those conditions, they recommend that you pull over, and you can always pull over to the side of the road or a roadside turnout, and you can wait for the rain to let up a little bit, or wait for the storm to pass, or plan to not travel that day and maybe push your travel plans till the next day. Those are always the best situations. But if you try to avoid those really challenging driving conditions, don't think your car can go through everything, because even Caddy said with even trucks and stuff, I think he has a truck and his and with 4-wheel drive and probably lots of good tread, and he was even sliding on rain and things like that. So you don't want to assume that your car can just handle everything, and you as a driver can handle everything. It's very scary when you get into those situations, and it's a headache to try to deal with a collision or going off the road. That's a really scary situation. So that's why we're going through this. We want to prepare you guys to be able to handle these things, but the best thing is to plan ahead so you're not in these situations. So what happens if you're involved in a collision? So we try to use the word collision. We try not to say, this is what I learned in driver's ed. We try not to use the word accident. You've heard that, a car accident. Accidents are things that necessarily can't be avoided, whereas collisions are like 100% avoidable. Any kind of traffic collision could be avoided by good driving behaviors and good attention and good vehicle maintenance. So the term you will likely see on an exam is actually collision. If it's talking about a collision, that means two vehicles bumping into each other like a car crash. But you'll see the term collision, such as this. These vehicles got into a collision. And so what happens if you are involved in a collision? There are certain things you must abide by. And this could very well come on your exam. They may ask you, what do you have to do? So every driver must remain on the scene of a collision. You can't just hit somebody and then be like, oh, I don't see any damage, see you later, and then just keep driving. You might have heard of the term hit and run. That's a kind of slang term or a common terminology, but what you'll see in the book is failing to remain at the scene of a collision. That's the actual term. And you can get demerits for that and a hefty fine. So it's against the law to leave a collision. You must remain there until you get things sorted out. So you have to report all collisions to the police where if there was somebody that was injured or killed, you have to report that, any serious injuries. You have to report a collision if there was an overall damage exceeds $2,000, and that's combined. Like here, in this situation, that very well likely could be over $2,000 in damage. It doesn't seem like much, but vehicles can get quite expensive and can definitely exceed that amount. Also, you need to report to the police if there was any damage to public property. So example, hitting a traffic sign, knocking over a parking meter, hitting any kind of public property damages, you need to report that even if they are less than $2,000. And that's for road safety, right? Say you were to knock over a stop sign by accident and then you don't tell anybody that stop sign's down. Now other drivers that are using that intersection, they don't know that they're supposed to be stopping, and that can create more collisions. So even if it's less than $2,000, you still need to report any kind of damages to public property to the police. So those are the three main situations where police do need to get involved. Otherwise, if it's like a little fender bender or a tiny little bump, nobody got injured, there was minimal damage, maybe it was icy and you kind of slid into another vehicle, but there was no major damage, then the two drivers can actually, they can swap information. So here, they don't have to necessarily go to the police, but they do have to talk with each other and share each other's information. So if you are in a collision, give assistance to anybody on the scene and ask if everyone's okay. Exchange your information with the other driver, which means your insurance information, record your name, your addresses. Even if there was any witnesses involved, get their information as well. Exchange your insurance details like the policy number, your registration information of your vehicle. It's also really important to record the date, the time, the location where it happened, any kind of weather conditions. Was it icy? Was it sunny? And any other details you might remember of that situation. Also notify your insurance company right away that you were involved in a collision, and because then they can start processing whether it's a claim or finding out what happened in that situation. It helps them get prepared. And that's why having all of these details is really important, because an insurance company will ask you, where were you? Where did this happen? What time? All that kind of stuff. So the more details you have, the better for you to answer all those questions and have all the information of both your drivers, him and the other person, even passengers. If there was a passenger, it's even helpful to have. It's not necessary, but if they're willing to share their information about passengers, that's helpful too, because the insurance company could very well ask, was there any other people in the vehicle? But the big thing is, do not discuss who is at fault. If you are in a collision situation, it's not, the insurance company is the one who's going to determine who is at fault anyways, or who's to blame, whatever the case may be. So there's no point in you arguing about it at the scene of the crime. No matter what, the insurance or the police are going to determine the situation. So you as drivers arguing, even if one of you guys agree that someone was at fault or it was your fault or you were going too fast but you didn't brake in time, well, you just sped out in front of me. Like it can turn into an argument versus, and it's not a very productive situation. So don't try to argue or try to get the other person to admit that they're guilty. Like, it's not a court of law. That's not how things work. All of that will get sorted out afterwards. So it's not helpful or useful or beneficial to try to argue about and determine who is at fault or who's to blame for the situation. There could have been a lot of things that contributed to it. So emergency vehicles and tow trucks. You might find yourself driving and you come across an emergency vehicle or tow trucks. There's a car broke down and a tow truck needs to come and tow them. So what do? Most situations when there are emergency vehicles on the road, they are either assisting other vehicles or there's a collision. They're trying to move damaged vehicles off of the road. So they need space to do their work. So in those situations, there's usually where the lane is getting lost or traffic has to go into one lane or it's being obstructed in some way. So some examples of these are traffic collisions, disabled vehicles, even spilled cargo. Sometimes heavy hauling trucks can, if it's windy outside, they could tip over and have cargo being spilled. So those are really dangerous situations, and you got to be mindful if this is happening. Also, even if there's just regular highway maintenance or construction going on, this is how you would behave, or this is how you handle those situations. You might see this sign and it says, slow down, give us room to work. There could be flashing red or yellow lights. There could be police on the scene. So if you see any of that, be prepared to slow down and even stop potentially, and look for who is directing traffic. Because even if the road you drove on was fine that morning, and if there's an emergency situation, something could be happening. They could be directing traffic elsewhere. They could actually have the road completely shut down. So you have to find an alternate route. So you got to pay attention to how the situation has changed. And if there's police on the scene directing people, if there's signs telling you to go a different direction, those are all things that could potentially happen. So the reason why you need to pay really close attention to these things is to avoid the possibility of getting into another collision or causing another collision while they're trying to clean up the first collision. So they're called secondary crashes, and they actually are more common than you think, and they're caused by people trying to look at the accident. So if two vehicles are crashed, naturally we're very curious and we want to go see what happened, right? But if you're doing that, you're looking at the collision while your vehicle's moving, and then you bump into the vehicle ahead of you. Now you've just caused another accident in the free lane, and now you're causing more headache for everyone else. So you try not to be nosy, try not to look at the situation. And if you absolutely have to, make sure that your vehicle's stopped and that you're safe and that you're paying attention to the road still. You do need to be responsible for yourself as a driver still. And then typical vehicles that are usually responding to accidents are police vehicles, ambulances, fire trucks, tow trucks, all that kind of stuff, which I mentioned. So if you see any of these vehicles, you're driving along and say you haven't even got to the scene of the collision yet, but there's emergency vehicles trying to get past, this is what you do. They have the right of way over you, and you got to pull over to the side of the road. So here's just a little quick video to show you. If you ever you hear sirens, you see flashing lights, you see emergency vehicles, you see a fire truck, here's how you respond. They do have to have their lights on though, or their sirens. Like, not if you're just driving beside a cop car, you wouldn't just pull over out of nowhere, right? This is when they are in those emergency situations and they have their lights activated.
Time is the enemy in any emergency. You can help emergency responders get to the scene as quickly as possible by following the rules of the road. When an ambulance, police car, or fire truck is behind you with their lights and siren activated, clear the intersection. If driving on a road with 1 or 2 lanes, move your vehicle to the right side of the road. Remember to use your turn signal. If driving on a road with 3 or more lanes, clear the intersection and move your vehicle to the nearest side of the road. Remember to use your turn signal. When in the center lane, drive your vehicle to the right side of the road. Come to a complete stop and wait for the emergency vehicle to pass you. Shoulder check to make sure there are no more emergency vehicles or other drivers approaching before you continue driving. Be considerate of other drivers as you re-enter the traffic flow. Remember to use your turn signal. Keep at least 150 meters between your vehicle and the emergency vehicles that just passed you. Thanks for following the rules of the road and helping emergency responders get to the scene as quickly as possible.
So that's how you handle a situation if you're ever hear sirens or see lights. You may also see this light. So this sign, here's another sign that's good to memorize. And what it says here is that the maximum speed limit for emergency vehicles. So you can see there's a vehicle with their lights activated. If you are passing a vehicle on a primary highway, so typically on a highway it's 100 kilometers an hour, the speed limit. This is telling you that the maximum speed limit, regardless of what it says or what the speed limit is posted, if there's an emergency vehicle, you need to slow down to 60 kilometers per hour minimum. It could actually be a lot, you know, there could be heavy traffic or there could be slow moving traffic, so you may be going slower than this, but maximum you cannot go over 60 kilometers per hour when there's emergency vehicles present. And that's for safety of everybody. It also says here that the speed fines double. So that's an important key factor. If that speed fine was typically 150 in regular conditions, but you just zoom by a cop who's got his lights on and you're doing over 60, that $150 ticket is now $300 ticket. So that's important to understand as well. That also applies to construction workers. If there's construction workers present and they're currently working on that construction site, and if you are not abiding by the speed limits of that construction zone, then those speed fines double as well. So that very well could be on your quiz. The other thing too is you cannot travel behind it. So say an ambulance or an emergency vehicle passes you, you pull over, and then you pull out quickly and start following them because you're like, hey, I'm going to get through this traffic jam quick. I'm going to go right through them. You have to actually stay 150 kilometers behind any emergency vehicle. So exercise caution, slow down, leave lots of space, let those emergency vehicles go through if they have to, or just get through the collision or the emergency situation slowly and be patient. And then after you've passed that vehicle or after you've left the construction zone or the emergency zone, then you can resume up to the regular speed limit. But that's another kind of rule of 5, 150 meters, which is quite a big distance. You can't follow too closely behind those emergency vehicles. Give them room to work and move past it, right? And don't gawk at it. Don't spend all your attention looking at it, because that can cause more collisions down the road. Okay, we're almost done this chapter. The last one that we want to talk about, we've done raining, we've done nighttime driving, we've done ice, and the other one that can reduce your visibility is fog or smoke. So when you're driving through smoke or fog, this is where you want to use your low beams. So at night, you want to use your high beams as much as possible and switch down to low beams just if you're passing other vehicles so you're not blinding them. But in general, nighttime driving, you want high beams. If you're in smoke and fog, the smoke and fog could be happening at night or during the day. So even though it's bright out, you wouldn't necessarily think of having your headlights on. But if you can't see through the heavy, thick smoke and fog, you can still see it's bright out, but you can't see far enough ahead of you because of the smoke. You put on your low beams. And the reason you do that is because your low beams are pointed towards the pavement so that you'll be able to see a little bit in front. It'll illuminate and light up a little bit in front of you, enough to see. But if you put on your high beams, it'll actually reflect back at you, and it makes the vision and your visibility even worse. So if you can't see well enough ahead to drive, even if it gets really heavy, I know a few years ago when we were having the fires out in Slave Lake, it was creating a lot of heavy smoke, so much that you couldn't even drive safely. You couldn't even see 2 feet in front of you on the road. So in those situations, either slow down or just move over, like just pull off, either wait for it to go or don't travel in those situations. So here's a video to show a bit about what I'm saying visually and how to use high beams and low beams in situations. Oh, it says it's not available. What happened? See if I can go to it. One sec.
There is a shortage of 500,000 machine learning and artificial intelligence
professionals. Okay, one second. I'm going to show you guys. I'm just going to have to switch my screen.
So this could save your life. 8 tips to drive safe in bad weather. You know, a car isn't just a way to go from A to B. It's a serious responsibility and a potentially dangerous machine for you and others, especially if you have to drive in bad weather. Luckily, there are special driving tips to avoid accidents when it's pouring rain, the road is covered in ice, or you're driving in thick fog. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell to join us on the bright side. So here we go. Tip number 1. Driving in fog. Do not drive at your usual speed. Slow down so that you have time to react to different hazards that may appear on the road. If visibility is extremely limited, park in a safe place and wait for the fog to clear. If you're driving in really thick fog, turn off the radio and keep your windows rolled down. This way, you'll be able to hear what's happening around you to partially make up for your limited visibility. Don't drive with your brights on. Fog consists of tiny water droplets that reflect light, making your visibility even worse. Be sure to drive with your low beams on, so that you can see the road and other drivers can see you. When the fog is really thick, drivers usually move closer to the center of the road. Beware of this natural tendency and make sure to stay in your lane. Let the outer shoulder be your guide. This way, you won't run into oncoming traffic or get blinded by the headlights there. Number 2, drive.
So with that, the reason why people tend to move over into the center lane, it could be because they can't see the lines on the road anymore. It's really disorienting for you in that fog when you can't see the road very well and you can't see it far ahead of you. So in order to avoid going off the road, because a turn could be coming really quickly, people tend to go to the center a little bit. So be mindful of that. Try not to do that. Try to stay in the middle of your lane as much as possible versus going towards the center, because there could be drivers on the other side going in the opposite direction doing the same thing. So you guys could get into a collision. So now we're on to chapter 6. That's the end of chapter 6. We're good. We've covered all those emergency situations with emergency vehicles, construction workers, speed fines could double, all that kind of stuff. So do your chapter 6 quiz